Welcome to Halton Police, the True Blue. I'm Jason Agnew. My guest at this time, Sergeant Ryan Smith, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Unit. Thanks for doing this, Ryan.
No, thanks for having me.
So we're going to have a chat about hate crimes and other topics related to them. But I think we need to first confront something that we are both two white gentlemen sitting here talking about this.
Yes.
How does that affect what you do?
I'd probably say a few things to that. One, I would say I acknowledge it for sure. And it's probably something that those that may be viewing it recognize or maybe comment on. That's the first thing. Secondly, our police service does and will continue to prioritize this work when I speak about responding to hate crimes. With that, we've developed robust policies, processes, and really the way we respond to these things. So regardless of kind of who's sitting in my chair, the response is always the same, or the expectation is that it's always the same. Kind of the last piece of that is that, an expectation of myself and whoever eventually takes this role is that there's strong connectivity to the community. And that's important because, I personally don't have that lived experience, or I've never experienced a hate crime. So I need to ensure that I'm surrounding myself with those who have experienced that can really inform me personally as we kind of make changes or, really respond to these types of incidents from a service delivery standpoint. So that would be an expectation for myself, and no doubt an expectation for those who may follow in my footsteps. So,
do you think it makes your job harder?
No, I don't, because I think we've done a good job at reaching out and speaking to the members of the community, doing that consultative work, surrounding myself with those even in our police service who may have that lived experience. Maybe on a one-on-one level, initially it can be challenging to kind of break down those barriers. But when people realize we're coming from an authentic place and we really truly have prioritized responding to hate crimes, it often doesn't become a challenge for me or really the police service.
So how did you personally get to this position?
Yeah, so I, prior to getting promoted, I did a lot of this work out of our Community Mobilization Bureau. At that time, we didn't have a dedicated Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion office. So I was kind of overseeing our diversity programming, our response to hate crime, a lot of our community initiatives, outside of that office. When we, in 2020, developed this Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion office, I was brought in as the sergeant to kind of oversee the development of it. And it really to provide a central kind of point for all things, many things even outside of our response to hate crimes, but hate crimes included.
So I think the first thing we need to do here is define specifically, what is a hate crime?
Yeah, and it's an interesting question because there's a misconception in the community that there's an actual section within the criminal code that is a hate crime. And there's really not. So a hate crime is really any criminal offense that is motivated in whole or in part by hate or bias. So an assault can be considered a hate crime. Mischief or damage to property can be considered a hate crime. Someone who utters threats towards an individual, that can be considered a hate crime. So as long as it, one, meets the definition of a criminal offense, and then secondly, is motivated in whole or in part by hate, that's what we would label as a hate crime.
Now, the other term I often hear is hate-motivated incident. What differentiates that from a hate crime?
Really, the only difference is that one is a crime, or one meets the definition of a crime, and one does not. So a hate-motivated incident is an incident that's motivated by hate or bias, but maybe doesn't meet the threshold of a crime. So that could be, somebody who may direct a racial slur towards somebody, kind of a one-off situation, may not meet the definition of a criminal code, but obviously motivated by hate and something that, we would attend and investigate and kind of respond to accordingly. So
you attend, you investigate, and then what? I think this is a lot of what the community would feel is, all right, there was a racial slur, there was some sort of graffiti or something like that had hate involved in it. They've called you guys, you show up. then what?
Yeah, and that is a challenge in the community because we are somewhat limited in what we can do because of the criminal code and the laws that we have to follow as officers, enforcing them, and as the community. But the reality is our response to whether it's a hate crime or a hate incident is the exact same. The only difference is when we lay a criminal charge or not at the end of it. But to your point is that it's important that the community calls us to report these hate-motivated incidents for a few reasons. One, so that we can document it. And if in the future we identify a pattern, that then can, maybe meet the threshold of a criminal offense. The other piece is that we need to be monitoring trends and patterns across the region. Like, what are the most impacted groups? Where are some of these things happening? And if we don't have that information, then it really can have a negative impact on our response and service delivery. So a one-off incident that maybe doesn't meet the criminal or doesn't meet the threshold of a criminal offense is one thing. But then when there's a pattern, it sometimes allows us to then lay a charge, whether it be a criminal harassment, other threats, cause disturbance. And we actually have done that in the past where there's been a pattern of this behavior. The individual has been spoken to and cautioned, obviously not getting it, continues to behave that way, and then we arrest them and lay the appropriate charge. So, it's important we can step in, stop the cycle of hate, hold people accountable to the best we can, but then lastly, support the individual who's been impacted, whether it's through our police service, through victim services, or otherwise.
So let me play devil's advocate here, because I'm sure a lot of people watching right now and people who do call will say, I called the police and they didn't do anything. How do you respond to that?
I would say that if that's how you feel after an interaction with our police service, then we didn't do a good job. And I can tell you that from, our executive command team, chief down, the expectation is that you don't feel that way after you call and report a hate incident. And what I mean by that is that although we can't lay a criminal charge, that should be very clearly explained to you and the reason for that. But we should also be there to support you post-incident and beyond if needed. So, I would say that if somebody feels as though we responded and we didn't do anything, then we didn't do a good enough job. And that's not the way we do business here in Halton, and that's not our policy and process. So hopefully somebody doesn't feel that way.
Now, I don't know if you're going to have an answer for this, but I feel as though there's a lot more hate reported in the media, like more incidents reported. I'm just wondering, trend-wise, is there a lot more out there, or is there just more reported and it's more unacceptable now?
Yeah, so typically we see two things to be true when we see an increase in reported hate incidents. And the key thing is reported to the police. That's really, as of now, the only thing that we control or that we know of. One is that more hate incidents are actually happening. That's the one thing. The other piece is that the community is more comfortable actually reporting them to us. That doesn't necessarily mean that more are happening. It just means that they're more comfortable in reporting to us. And I'll give you an example is, if our police service undertakes, a big community outreach or education initiative surrounding hate crimes, letting people know what they are and what they're not, what our response looks like, what support that we give, and we really educate them and empower them, that in turn could increase the number of reported incidents because people are identifying them more. People are more comfortable, coming forward and reporting it. People have more trust in the police that it's actually going to be taken seriously, which is a huge barrier. Obviously, you spoke about it earlier. And that can, increase the number of reported incidents. So those are kind of the two main things we see in terms of why there's more reported incidents or not.
What role does social media play in what you do? And by that, I mean, you have people that can find themselves on social media, and it's a power in numbers, perhaps in a bad way. These are people that probably would not interact if they don't find each other online. And then along with that, there's a certain amount of anonymity that comes with social media, and you're nodding profusely with that.
Yeah.
So what are the trends that you've seen online with hate, essentially.
You're absolutely right. In 10 years from now, we'll have more of an online presence than we do now. And because of that, that provides a place where people who want to spread hate can do so. And you're right, they can do it anonymously and without us, or with us having a really challenging time identifying who they are. Because, 50 years ago, you couldn't spread hate online. And we come to today and you could be in Australia spreading hate in the region of Halton. It makes it really challenging for us to investigate that. The other piece is, the reality is there's an element of free speech, and there is a little bit of a gray area right now within the current legislation in terms of what is actually something that would constitute, a hate crime or hate speech as opposed to free speech. What is a public place versus a private place? And it can get muddied with that online world. So it's really challenging for us to identify strategies to address that, right? Because as technology advances, we have to stay on top of that. And there's a lot of factors that go into it. It's, political, if we have elections in other countries or hate incidents reported in other countries or factors that don't even, you would think impact Halton, without question have a localized impact. So
do you have, you must have ears to the ground. And when I say the ground, I mean an online presence, you know what I mean? Like where the rumbles are happening. How does your department investigate and get in there and figure out where the hate is coming from, where these groups are, infiltrate them? And I don't want you to give away all your secrets, but I'm curious, if you're not a part of that group, how do you become aware of it?
Yeah, so the first thing is someone needs to report it to us, unless we happen to stumble across it in another type of investigation or in our personal lives. So the biggest thing is it needs to be reported to us, and it often is reported to us. The second piece is through our intelligence unit or our cybercrime unit. When we get this information, they're able to monitor that online and try to gather as much intelligence information that we can in terms of, is it an organized hate group? Is it an individual that's spreading hate? What type of ideology do they adhere to? And is there a threat to the community here in Halton and or otherwise? So when we get that information, we ensure that, we put the right resources in place to monitor it, do a threat assessment if there's an issue here, and then follow up accordingly if there's an enforcement element or otherwise. So
now, historically, there is a mistrust of certain communities with the police. How are Halton police trying to overcome that?
Yeah, great question and very true. And the reality is a lot of, that mistrust we bear responsibility for through the years. And it's going to take a lot of time for us to build that trust. When we're speaking specifically related to hate crimes, it becomes a problem when a community or an individual doesn't feel comfortable coming forward and reporting it to us. So we can't get the ball rolling on really what we do, which I think we do well. So what we've done over the last few years is we've made an effort and prioritized us going out into these communities, speaking to the leaders, getting in front of individuals, building relationships, breaking down any barriers, but really educating them about our response so that they know that when you call the Halton Police to report a hate incident or a hate crime, we will be there, we will support you. And it kind of goes back to your earlier point is, what if someone says, I called and they did nothing? Then we didn't do our job. And that's not how we do business here in Halton. And people need to understand that. So that's really what we've done. We've invested so much time and energy, but there's still so much work to be done, because I know that here in Halton, there are more hate crimes and hate incidents happening that are being reported to us. And until that's not the case, we have work to do. So
you mentioned reporting, but what else? I mean, police work hand in hand with the communities that they service. It's a two-way street, really. What can members of the community do aside from reporting to assist you?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things is that support somebody who may be a victim of a hate crime or incident. Help them report it to us. Maybe there's a language barrier. Maybe, they don't feel comfortable coming into a police station. Maybe you can provide them a safe space where we can go out and actually get the information and do what we can to support them. So what they can do is, the community is our eyes and ears. When you see something, you need to report it. If you know someone who's been negatively impacted, you need to support them in coming forward, because you would be surprised at times of, there could be hate graffiti, painted on a building or in a public place. How many people have driven by that before they've called the police and we can show up and notify the town and cover it up? So how many members of the community have been victimized before we can actually get there and respond, right? So we just need to empower the community to step up and support the effort that, we're doing in terms of, hate crime work.
So before we go, tell me a little bit about the No Hate in Halton campaign.
Yeah, so we launched this campaign. We've been running this campaign now. It's the second year. We've partnered with all the school boards across the region, both the French and English-speaking Catholic and public boards. So it's an awareness campaign in 180 learning facilities across the region. And it's just trying to spread the message, just anti-hate messaging, letting people know what we're doing as an organization to support them, what resources are available in the community. Again, to your point, what their role is in the community in combating hate, and just really, it's an awareness campaign that we want people to go out and spread the message and get talking about things. We don't want people to start talking about hate necessarily, but we want the conversation to stay alive, right? And people to be mindful that this is still happening in our region. It's unacceptable, and that we all have a role to play. So it's a campaign that's, I don't see going away anytime soon. It's going to be something that's permanently embedded in our programming, and we've seen a lot of success in terms of its reach. So it's something that's going to continue to grow year from year. And it's not just schools, it's anyone that might want to get involved in it can step up, create a video, really do anything that you think will have an impact on creating a better Halton. So
Ryan, you do important work. It's great work, and appreciate you taking time to tell us all about it today.
Awesome. Thank you.
If you liked what you heard on today's episode, please check out other episodes of Halton Police, The True Blue on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Keep up to date with us on social media under the handle @Halton Police.